thanks so much for being on. Eric and I worked together back at the LeadMD days. If anyone's listening to these Attribution Time podcasts, I worked at LeadMD because I talk about it a lot. I think it was an awesome opportunity. But Eric, just such an intelligent individual who worked on the data and the strategy side of things. We were catching up last week or so, and on his new project, Tangible IQ, right?
That's right.
Got it. And he mentioned what he's doing with Beyond Market. And I thought this is awesome. And I can see everything through the lens of marketing attribution. But I want Eric, go ahead and give me a rundown. What is Beyond Market? What is this concept?
Yeah, sure. So if you've ever had marketing research done or market research done, it typically will focus on a circle of things that are you believe are easy to control. So suppliers, competitors, you do a SWOT analysis, you look at where your supply chain ingredients come from and stuff like that. And all of those things you can impact a bit with marketing, especially on the consumer end. But what really impacts those things in the middle is this larger sphere of what they call beyond market forces. Or non-market forces. I like beyond market better. And this is a term that was coined by business professors. There's a few of them who've sort of worked with this concept. There's David Barron and Neil Malhotra at Stanford. Daniel Diermeyer, he's at Vanderbilt now. And the idea is that there are things that influence this inner sphere, like activism, regulatory politics, consumer megatrends, geopolitics, and so on, that are going to have a much more pronounced effect on your trend line than whether you got your MQLs up by 30 or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for really big impacts, especially if you're proactive about it. So Neil Malhotra, I'm actually recording a video about this later. I'm hoping to make it fun. We'll see. But Neil Malhotra had a paper looking at disaster preparedness, and it's a good analogy for businesses being proactive. So voters don't like to vote for budgets to prevent like wildfire disasters, but they don't have any choice but to vote to free up money for wildfire repair and reclamation and stuff after the disasters happened, and to fight fires and so on. And he found the ratio for being proactive versus reactive is about 15-1. So he's got the saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And you can apply that pretty well to the non-market space. So if you're letting somebody else shape your environment for you, you're going to be playing by their rules of the game. And that can be, if you don't have a good activist strategy, if you don't have a good media strategy, if you're not building coalitions of stakeholders who are similarly aligned and who are able to engage in the discussion. So being proactive there has many happy returns.
Yeah. And when we were talking about this, I mean, it's so fascinating, right? Because in the day-to-day, when I talk about marketing attribution, and for those who are listening to this podcast to gain insights, right, about, well, how are other people doing this? How are we monitoring this? And how do we measure these things? When we were talking about this beyond market, there's going to be aspects which we technically are able to measure, right? That's what you are trying to do, right? You're saying, okay, we have a history here of these ebbs and flows based upon whatever your market niche is, that we've seen a trend line that's causing these changes, right? And we can try to look into the future and say, okay, is there something coming up? Is there something about to occur? Are these happening? So there's this aspect of measurement that's always there. And I think, honestly, in an ideal state with marketing attribution, that's the end goal, right? Is that if we can find the idea of this trend line of like, this is the most common process here for closing this type of deal, we can do those things. But there's always going to be this aspect of beyond market that are going to be continually changing. And that you have to, as an enterprise organization, keep that in mind, right? You can't just, it's not going to ever be boiled down to this is the one size that fits all, but you have to understand what are these trends? What is this thing? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It's a little off, but there, have you heard of, there's this measurement, or there was this thing that was projected, I think it was in the early 1900s, that basically predicted every market crash. Have you heard about this? And
Is
so
this the inverted yield curve stuff?
yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's someone came up with it and is saying, okay, these are the things, without really acknowledging any, like, not knowing what wars were going to happen or this and that. I think it might have been established in World War One or something, but nonetheless, they were able to like find this pattern, and it's been, I think, within, I would say, a 5 to 6 to 10 year range, uh, in line with where these influxes are going to happen within the market. And it's just really fascinating. Like, you can take a lot of data, and we're in this day and age of a ton of data, right? Even more than what we had in the early 1900s, to be able to gather this analysis.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at it. And I think especially with what you're doing with the marketing attribution stuff, um, it's mostly using historical data to predict the future, um, which works a lot of the time until it doesn't.
Right.
So like I think people like to use COVID as the example of like, all right, time to
Yeah.
refresh our models because everything's changed. But things always change. Like
Yeah.
that's the constant. Nassim Taleb wrote his book Anti-Fragile and a few other ones, Black Swan, and so he wrote a whole
Yeah. I
trilogy.
think Black Swan's a real popular one for, I think, for a lot of that got put on the market, or I think raised back up with Never Split the Difference. And the individual
Yeah.
who wrote that, his consulting is Black Swan. But yeah, can you actually break down the idea of Black Swan? Because I think it's a really interesting concept
Yeah,
there.
he has a analogy. He calls it the turkey problem, where the turkey likes the farmer every day up until Thanksgiving, and then discovers that the farmer doesn't have his best interest in mind. Like this one event has completely changed that turkey's life. And like there's an episode of The Simpsons a long time ago where they get kidnapped by aliens. And do you ever watch The Simpsons?
Yeah,
All right.
I remember several Alien episodes, so
Okay.
enlighten me.
It's It was one of the Halloween episodes, and
Yeah,
they see the aliens are reading this book, and it's uh, the book is called How to Cook Children. But then he
okay,
blows some dust off the book, and it says How to Cook for Children, and they're like, oh shoot, and then he blows some more dust off, and it says How to Cook for 40 Children, uh, and no, How to Cook 40 Children. That's what it is, and then they're
yeah,
like, oh no, and How to Cook for 40 Children. So like one little bit of information changes the whole model.
yeah.
Uh, and I know like modeling stuff and stuff like that, but we have to, in addition to looking at our historical models, we need to be using causal knowledge about the world, um, and in order to have an idea of how we should set our strategies to be less fragile to uncertain environments.
That's so good, because I mean, every enterprise organization, right, is going to increase their metrics because they have to do that for the shareholder,
Hmm.
right? And so what so many organizations do, though, is still that classic, here's our historical data, right? We boil it down to something as simple as, okay, if we get 50 leads and they convert to 25 MQLs, and those 25 MQLs are going to convert to 13 opportunities, and 13 opportunity of those 13 opportunities, 5 are going to close and create $1 million, right? It's something as
Yeah.
simple as that, and that they'll continue to scale that more and more and more until they can't, until it doesn't work because COVID happens, or because a war happens, or something occurs, and it's like, oh, this model doesn't work, right? And or to your point, if we have this beyond market of, well, where is this industry trending? Where is,
Mhm.
where are these items actually headed? Is this a viable product in 15 years? And if not, where do we need to shift? Where do we have to make that shift?
Yeah, and part of it is how do you proactively shift to meet what the future marketplace is going to look like. But part of it is I think people feel like they don't have very much power to shape what that future looks like. And that's not true at all. Like people are constantly shaping that world for us. If you build the right coalitions, you can create those rules that you can play by. So like sometimes it looks like an association strategy where you push for regulation that is in favor of your product line or so on. Or sometimes it's just engaging with the right stakeholder groups to get the public license to operate, which basically gives you a reputation buffer so that when your business messes up, which it always does, people still view it as, if you look at like Samsung, right? Like if Samsung messes up, South Korea is like, oh no, we messed up. But if Microsoft messes up, the United States is like, oh, you messed up.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
so having that license to operate is extremely valuable too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So with what are some of the things that you're working on, and how are you helping shape certain aspects of your clients' go to market?
Well, one thing that the route that I'm pursuing most heavily right now is with nonprofits, partly because I want to build this new organization uh, in line with the values of the people who are in the organization. So we're
Mm,
seeking out nonprofits who are similarly aligned. And the other really good thing about nonprofits is they have to care. They don't have to, but they typically care more about more than just marketing metrics
right.
or like getting engagement or something. They really need those metrics to be aligned across the whole journey, because everybody actually believes in the purpose of the organization.
There's a
So
moral value within nonprofits that as you drive forward raising money, you can't
mhm,
lose sight of that, right? Because if
yeah,
you're a place that's about helping starving children and you raise $100 million and 80% of that goes to kids that aren't in need, then you lose your value.
that's right. And or if you're an activist group, you need to have high profile victories. So no
Mm-hmm.
matter how many clicks or likes you get, it comes down to target selection and angle of attack, and that's what brings
Mm,
in donation is high profile victories. So like if you
that's
think
right.
of like Greenpeace, they've pretty much given up on fighting Exxon because Exxon just signals high willingness to fight, and they've got a massive war chest, and nobody really cares, and nobody expects Exxon to be like a good neighbor. But if you look at a firm like Starbucks, who Greenpeace, is more likely to go after because they're saying that our brand is that we care
Yeah.
about people and the environment and so on. And they have a pretty low willingness to fight. So, and it's a more public, it's a more visible consumer brand. So those are the sorts of targets you'd want to go after. Um, I don't do a whole lot with activists, but it's more along the lines of what what are the core competencies of our nonprofit. So which what issues that people feel uncertain about can you explain most credibly and most parsimoniously so that it makes people feel a little bit less uncertain about the environment. And then you
Mm,
focus on those winning issues for your organization. You break it down into the top, 3 to 5 stakeholders for each of those issues, and you figure out what their values are. Once you figure out their values and sort of their psychographics, so are they cognitive? Are they more feeling? Do they shy away from ideas like profit, or do they view profit as positive, something like that? Then you know how to build that message map
yeah.
to meet them where they are and then get them to your position. So it's a lot of bridging from one position to another.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a lot of like, you see things happen within the B2C side of things, and nonprofits is even an extension off of that, right? I mean, as we just talked about, it is different than just the general B2C, right? It can be as transactional at times. Someone sees a case, a high profile case, someone wins, they go to that nonprofit, they give money, and that's the one and
Yeah.
only time they do it, right? And then the nonprofit would use, insights like what that you're giving to say, okay, well, how do we continue to get this person to engage and go? Where the B2B world's a little bit slower to adopt some of those trends, right? It's a little slower to adopt that. Now, transactionally, it takes a lot longer too, right? There's something different about that. It's, enterprise-wise, it's 6 months, 12, 18 months, who knows? I mean, it's just a much longer process in that buying journey there. Yeah, and with that too, what's really interesting is what you're getting into, which then bleeds into some of the B2C, is you have demographic information that is really key. Like I haven't been in the nonprofit space early on. Male is still very popular, right? So even from an attribution perspective, like we were trying to understand how many of these people came in through with this, sending out mail. How many people knew about this before getting mail out there? But again, like those people that we're sending mail to are typically older, because this younger generation isn't even opening up mail. And so you have different approaches even there, where this activism that you're talking about could be for both sides, but the approach and the process there can be different for each group.
Yeah, mail and events.
Events are huge. Yeah, exactly.
And it's very, very high touch, and it's hard to digitize some of those things. So it's like, how do you get all of those touch points into your CDP, and is it even really necessary? If you're going for like high value donors, then that's essentially account-based marketing.
Exactly.
Where
Yeah.
you're gonna have your own strategy for each one of them.
Yeah, very personal. You're gonna have a team of people trying to work with someone who can give $1 million or more or whatever, and they're gonna just keep working them until they, and that could be the 2-year process where you are just, engaging with them and showing them your value, because that will pay off. Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, yeah, give a quick plug for Tangible IQ. I think what you're doing there is just awesome. I think it's just tangible.iq is the website. Or
No dot, just Tangible IQ, or in French, Tangiblique.
See, yeah, there you go. I learned French today. I knew I'd learned something outside of it.
It's not actually
French. I know. So yeah, give a quick plug for Tangible IQ here.
Yeah, so Tangible IQ, we take people from intelligence. Well, I should say we take people from information into intelligence, which basically situates people within their environments, and also relative to their strategic goals. We go from intelligence to strategy, and we go from strategy to operationalization. So we've got we're able to build up from the ground up with the best people I could imagine, to come up with good strategies for people, blending data with their human capacity for intelligence, and then developing good go-to-market practices. And that can include, which technologies you should be using, which channels you should be using, who you should be targeting. How do you get those messages out there to the right stakeholders at the right time, to build coalitions and to build happy customer bases.
Love that. That's so cool. All right. So I like to end every attribution time with a general just pop question that Eric does not know about. None of my hosts will know about. So one thing I know about Eric is that he has chickens. He's raising chickens and all that. So how many chickens are we working with now, Eric? How many are living on the grounds here?
We've got 12 chickens now.
All right. And do they all produce like eggs? What's the deal? What do we?
We've got 10. No, we got 11 producers. One that's very broody. She's been around for a long time. I don't think she can make eggs anymore. But I like to I use a dumbbell approach. I take extreme risks with technology on one hand, and then I take extreme low risk Luddite measures on the other hand. Because I want to know that I'm always going to have eggs, even if things don't pan out with the risky stuff. So
even when they're $6 for a dozen at the store. I love it.
Yeah.
Eric, thanks so much for jumping into attribution time. This was just awesome. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Ian. Thank you.